The Adventure of the Forgotten Forgeries. It was upon Christmas Eve in the year 1896 that the adventure which I have entitled The Adventure of the Shadow Artist had its beginning. The weather was bitter, with a keen wind driving flurries of snow against the windows of our old quarters in Baker Street. Holmes had been moody all day, alternating between his violin and a pile of chemical apparatus, while I had sought refuge in a new volume of sea stories. The fire burned low and the room was heavy with the scent of Holmes's strongest shag when, shortly after 9 o'clock, Mrs. Hudson appeared with a large square envelope upon a salver. "There was no knock, sir," she said, a little breathlessly. "The gentleman left it at the door and was gone before I could open it." Holmes took the envelope with a quickening of interest that I knew well. It was of heavy cream-laid paper, addressed in a fine copperplate hand. Sherlock Holmes, Esquire, 221B Baker Street. There was no stamp, no mark of the post. He turned it over once, sniffed it lightly, and then slit it open with his pocket-knife. Within lay several sheets closely written in the same elegant script, together with a smaller sealed note. Holmes unfolded the larger document and read aloud in his clear, incisive voice. "To Sherlock Holmes, Esquire. You will, I trust, forgive the dramatic manner of this communication. I am he who, in the summer of 1846, removed from the National Gallery 4 paintings of inestimable value, namely, The Fighting Temeraire by Turner, The Blue Boy by Gainsborough, The Hay Wain by Constable, and The Age of Innocence by Reynolds, and replaced them with copies of my own execution. Those copies have hung upon the walls of the gallery for 50 years, accepted by the world as the originals, while the true works have lain in concealment. I am now an old man, and the hand of death is upon me. Conscience, long silent, speaks at last with a voice I cannot ignore. I have therefore retrieved the originals and placed them in 4 churches of this realm, as offerings more fitting than any gallery. Should you prove worthy of the trust I place in your singular abilities, you may restore them to the nation. The first awaits you where the great fire's architect whispers secrets in the dome, beneath the gallery where echoes confess. I remain, sir, with admiration and contrition, the shadow artist." Holmes laid the letter down and sat for a moment in silence, his thin, eager face lit by the glow of the fire. "A forgery that has deceived the experts of 2 generations, he murmured at length. "This is no common criminal, Watson. Come, we must test the truth of this extraordinary claim without delay." Within a quarter of an hour we were in a hansom, rattling through the snowy streets toward Trafalgar Square. The National Gallery was closed to the public at that hour, but Holmes's card and a few quiet words to the night watchman secured our admittance. The curator, Mr. Fairley, roused from his rooms above, joined us with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. Under the strong gas jets of the principal room, Holmes examined each of the 4 paintings in turn. I watched as he bent close, pocket lens in hand, his long fingers passing lightly over canvas and frame. He tested the paint with a drop of solvent from his pocket case, measured the craquelure with a micrometer, and even sniffed the surface as though it were a problem in chemistry. At last he straightened, his eyes gleaming. "There is no doubt, Mr. Fairley," he said calmly. "All 4 are forgeries, masterful, brilliant, but forgeries nonetheless. Observe the uniformity of the aging in the pigments, the microscopic regularity of the brushwork, the weave of the canvas itself. Our correspondent speaks the truth." The curator staggered back as though struck. "Impossible! They have been examined by the foremost authorities." "Authorities who saw what they expected to see," Holmes replied. "The deception is 50 years old and perfect in its kind. But come, Watson. We have a painting to recover." We returned briefly to Baker Street, where Holmes deciphered the accompanying riddle with his customary swiftness. "St. Paul's, of course. The dome by Wren, the whispering gallery. Beneath the gallery where echoes confess. A side chapel, perhaps, or a confessional." The snow was falling thicker as we climbed once more into a cab and made for Ludgate Hill. The great cathedral loomed dark against the wintry sky, its dome half hidden in the swirling flakes. A verger, persuaded by a sovereign and Holmes's quiet authority, admitted us and left us to our search. It was in a small side chapel near the south transept that we found it. Turner's original Fighting Temeraire, carefully wrapped in oilskin and concealed behind a hanging altar cloth. The colours glowed even in the dim candlelight, the ship majestic in its last voyage. Upon the back of the frame was pinned a second sealed note containing the next clue. Holmes stood for a moment gazing at the picture, a rare softness in his expression. "A noble work restored to the light," he said quietly, "and the game, Watson, has only begun." We passed that Christmas night upon the train to Salisbury, the carriage rocking gently through the frozen countryside while Holmes sat in silence, the recovered Turner propped carefully between us. The snow had ceased, and a hard frost glittered under the moon, turning the fields to silver. I dozed fitfully, lulled by the rhythm of the wheels. But Holmes remained wakeful, his keen profile outlined against the window as he turned the problem over in that ceaselessly active brain. It was early morning when we reached our destination, the cathedral city still half asleep under its white mantle. The great spire of Salisbury rose above the rooftops, sharp and ethereal against the pale sky, the tallest in all England. Holmes regarded it with satisfaction. "Our second station on this curious pilgrimage, Watson," he remarked as we stepped onto the platform. The clue was plain enough. The spire that pierces the plain, and the chapter house that guards one of the 4 surviving copies of Magna Carta. We took rooms at the nearest inn only long enough to leave the painting in safekeeping, then made our way on foot to the close. The cathedral precincts were quiet, save for the echoing footsteps of a verger and the distant tolling of bells practicing for Christmas Day. The breath of passers-by hung in the air like incense. Holmes had already formed his plan. "The hiding place will be somewhere connected with the idea of charter or covenant," he said. "The chapter house itself is the most likely." We gained admittance without difficulty. The fame of Sherlock Holmes had by this time reached even the canons of Salisbury, and my friend's card, together with a discreet hint that the matter touched the safety of a national treasure, opened every door. The chapter house is an octagonal chamber of singular beauty, its slender central pillar branching like a palm tree to support the vaulted roof. Around the walls runs a frieze of medieval sculpture, and in glass cases repose the precious documents that draw scholars from every corner of Europe. It was beside the case containing the Magna Carta that Holmes paused, his eyes narrowing. He passed his fingers lightly over the carved oak panelling behind the display, then knelt and examined the floor. A faint smile touched his lips. "Here, Watson. Observe the dust. It has been disturbed quite recently, and in a pattern that suggests a panel has been opened." With infinite care he pressed upon the carving of a bishop's mitre, and a small section of the wainscot swung outward upon concealed hinges. Within the cavity lay a package wrapped in the same oilskin as the first. Holmes drew it forth and uncovered Gainsborough's original Blue Boy, the true canvas, with its luminous blues and silvers undimmed by time. I could not suppress an exclamation of wonder. 50 years hidden away, and yet the colours are as fresh as though painted yesterday. "The work of a master preserver as well as a master forger," Holmes replied. "Note the microscopic traces of wax upon the surface. Our shadow artist has employed the same methods used by the old Italians to protect their panels." Upon the back of the frame was pinned another sealed note. Holmes broke it open and read, "You have found the second. I begin to believe you will complete the course. Proceed now to the abbey where roses bloomed in war, in the crypt where Lancastrian shadows lie." The shadow artist. Holmes folded the paper thoughtfully. "Tewkesbury Abbey," he said at once. The Battle of Tewkesbury in 1471 decided the Wars of the Roses, Many Lancastrian nobles lie buried in its crypt. Our friend grows more personal with each clue. While we stood admiring the recovered painting, a telegram was brought to us from Lestrade. Holmes read it and handed it to me with a grim smile. National Gallery in uproar, it ran. Forgeries confirmed by 3 independent experts. Press kept at bay for present. Where are you? Urgent. Lestrade. The fat is fairly in the fire now, Holmes observed. But we shall not pause. The 3rd painting awaits us in Gloucestershire. As we left the chapter house, I glanced back at the serene beauty of the cathedral close, the frost sparkling on the ancient stone. Somewhere in this quiet place, only hours or days before, an old man haunted by remorse had stood where we stood now, handling treasures he had stolen in the prime of life. The thought lent a strange solemnity to the bright Christmas morning. We caught the next train westward, carrying with us the 2nd of the 4 lost masterpieces, while Holmes sat with the new clue upon his knee, his eyes half closed, already far ahead upon the trail. The railway carried us northward through Gloucestershire, where the low winter sun cast long shadows across the water meadows of the Severn and the Avon. It was late afternoon when we alighted at Tewkesbury Station, and the ancient town lay hushed beneath a light fall of snow. The Abbey church, massive and solemn, dominated the skyline, its great Norman tower rising like a fortress above the clustering roofs. Holmes surveyed it with keen appreciation. A fitting 3rd station, he observed as we walked toward the close. Here, in 1471, the Yorkists crushed the Lancastrians in bloody combat among the streets and meadows. Many a noble of the Red Rose found his last resting place in the crypt beneath the choir. Our shadow artist chooses his shrines with care. The clue had been explicit: the abbey where roses bloomed in war, in the crypt where Lancastrian shadows lie. We entered the great building as the vergers were preparing for evensong. The air was fragrant with incense and resonant with the low practicing of the organ. A sidesman, impressed by Holmes's quiet authority and my own assurances that the matter concerned property of national importance, conducted us below. The crypt is a low-vaulted chamber of massive pillars, damp and dim even on the brightest day. In this twilight of stone, we carried our lanterns carefully, examining the many memorial slabs and chantry chapels that line the walls. Holmes moved with that silent intensity I had seen so often on the scent, his eyes darting from inscription to inscription. At length he paused before a small recessed chapel dedicated to the memory of Lord Despencer, a Lancastrian slain at the battle. The stone floor showed faint signs of recent disturbance, scratches upon the flagstones and a thin film of dust displaced. "Here, Watson," he whispered. Kneeling, he pressed upon the edge of a memorial slab bearing a worn effigy of a knight. It moved grudgingly upon hidden pivots, revealing a shallow cavity beneath. From this we drew forth another oilskin package, and within it Constable's true "The Hay Wain," the greens and golds of the Suffolk landscape glowing softly in the lantern light, as though the summer day it depicted had been imprisoned for 50 years, and now breathed again. I could not help uttering a low exclamation of delight. "It is flawless, Holmes, not a touch of damp or fading." "Our friend has been a jealous guardian," Holmes replied. "See how the canvas has been treated with a thin coat of varnish renewed at intervals. But look closer, here and here." He held the lantern near, and with his lens showed me the same microscopic flourishes we had noted upon the Gainsborough, a delicate interlacing of shadow lines that formed, to the unaided eye, nothing more than a trick of the brush, yet under magnification resolved into the faint monogram of the shadow artist himself. Pinned to the back of the frame was the accustomed sealed note. Holmes opened it and read in a low voice. "You have found the 3rd, Mr. Holmes, and I begin to believe you will indeed complete what I began. The last awaits you where the pilgrim's path meets the martyr's throne, in the shadow of the Mother Church of England. You trace my hand across the years. I am the shadow artist no longer. E-H-E-H, Holmes repeated softly. Elias Hawthorne. The name has been hovering at the edge of memory since Salisbury. A young painter of considerable promise in the 40s, exhibited at the Academy, then vanished from public view after 1850. The obituary notices declared him dead of fever in Italy 2 years later. A convenient fiction, it would seem. He folded the note and stood for a moment in thought, the lantern casting sharp shadows across his aquiline features. This pilgrimage grows deeply personal, he continued. Each church has marked a stage in Hawthorne's own spiritual journey, I suspect. And now he signs with his true initials. He feels the end approaching and casts off the mask. As we restored the slab and prepared to leave, I glanced toward the narrow stair that led upward to the abbey. For an instant I thought I discerned a movement in the gloom, an aged figure in a long cloak, half seen against the flicker of candlelight from above. I started forward, but when we reached the top there was no one to be seen among the scattered worshippers assembling for service. Only the echo of our own footsteps and the solemn swell of the organ. Holmes noticed my uneasiness. You saw him, Watson? Or fancied you did? The shadow artist watches his own confession unfold, perhaps, but he will not flee. He has set this stage too carefully. We secured the constable in the inn's strong room beside its companions and took the night mail eastward. The train thundered through the darkness toward Canterbury, carrying us to the final act of this strange drama of art and atonement. The final stage of our pilgrimage brought us to Canterbury on the morning of Christmas Day itself. The ancient city was astir with worshippers bound for the cathedral, their breath mingling with the frosty air as bells pealed from every tower. The great church rose before us in all its medieval splendor, the Mother Church of England, goal of countless pilgrims since Chaucer's time, and scene of Thomas Becket's bloody martyrdom. Holmes regarded the towering facade with that keen, appreciative glance he reserved for anything finely wrought, whether by nature or by man. Our shadow artist has chosen a noble terminus, he remarked. The pilgrim's path ends here, at the martyr's throne. The clue is unmistakable, the Trinity Chapel and the site of the former shrine. We entered with the stream of worshippers attending the Christmas morning service, but slipped away quietly when the choir began the anthem. The cathedral vergers, accustomed to scholarly visitors even on holy days, raised no objection when Holmes explained, truthfully enough, that we sought to examine certain details of the architecture connected with a matter of historical importance. The Trinity Chapel, raised above the eastern crypt, is reached by a flight of worn stone steps. Here once stood the magnificent golden shrine of St. Thomas, enriched with jewels and gold, until Henry VIII's commissioners stripped it bare. The very spot where the Archbishop fell beneath the knights' swords is marked by a simple modern altar. Holmes moved slowly about the chapel, his eyes scanning pavement, pillars, and the empty niches that had once held relics. At length he paused beside a small reliquary recess in the wall, a modest cavity now empty, save for a faded velvet lining. "Observe the dust, Watson," he said in a low voice. "It has been brushed aside quite recently, and the velvet shows the pressure of a rectangular object." With delicate fingers he explored the back of the recess and discovered a concealed panel that slid aside at a touch. From the hidden space he withdrew the last oilskin package. Within lay Reynolds' original The Age of Innocence, the child's sweet face gazing out at us with a serenity untouched by the years. I drew a long breath. All four recovered, Holmes, and each as perfect as the day it was painted. Holmes turned the canvas to the light and examined the back with his lens. Upon the stretcher were inscribed, in minute characters visible only under magnification, a series of numbers and letters that resolved themselves into an address, 17 Calder's Yard, Whitechapel. A final note was pinned beside the inscription, "The shadow steps into light. Bring the innocents home through you, Mr. Holmes, for only you could follow where conscience led. Come to Calder's Yard if you would see the artist unmasked. Elias Hawthorne. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that fierce joy I'd seen so often at the moment of triumph. Elias Hawthorne, he repeated. The mask falls at last, and he invites us to the final meeting. Lestrade must be informed. We shall need him when we close the net. We dispatched a telegram from the cathedral close, then carefully packaged the Reynolds with its companions and arranged for their safe conveyance to London under guard. Lestrade's reply reached us within the hour. He would meet us at Liverpool Street Station with men and a warrant. Records newly consulted confirmed that Hawthorne, long believed dead, had lived quietly in the East End under the name of Elias Harman for more than 40 years. As we boarded the train for London, the cathedral bells rang out joyously for the Christmas benediction. I could not help reflecting upon the strange contrast. While the nation celebrated peace and goodwill, we were pursuing to its end a drama of theft, genius, and belated atonement that had begun half a century before. Holmes sat opposite me, the final note upon his knee, his thin, eager face lit by the pale winter sunlight. "A remarkable man, Watson," he said musingly. "Criminal he may be, yet he has preserved 4 masterpieces that might otherwise have suffered from neglect or mishandling. His forgeries, too, are works of genius. Perhaps in time they will hang beside the originals as a testament to his skill, but the law must have its course." The train gathered speed, carrying us back toward London and the confrontation that awaited in the narrow streets of Whitechapel. We reached London as dusk was falling on Christmas Day, the streets unusually quiet save for the occasional peal of church bells or the muffled sound of carol singers in the distance. Lestrade awaited us at Liverpool Street with 2 plainclothes men and a cab. His Scotland Yard whiskers fairly bristled with excitement. "Mr. Holmes, you've done it again," he exclaimed when we had stowed the 4 carefully wrapped canvases in the cab. The gallery directors are beside themselves, half with horror at the deception, half with joy at getting the originals back. But this address in Whitechapel, shall we take him tonight? "Tonight," Holmes replied firmly. "Our shadow artist has invited us, Inspector. He will not flee." Calder's Yard proved to be a narrow, mean alley off the commercial road, lined with decaying warehouses and tenements. Number 17 was a tall, narrow building that had once been a painter's studio. Its great north window was cracked and patched with brown paper, but a faint light glowed behind it. The door stood slightly ajar, as though in welcome. We entered cautiously, Lestrade's men behind us, and climbed a rickety stair that smelled of turpentine and age. At the top, a door opened into a large garret room lit by a single gas jet and the embers of a dying fire. The place was a chaos of canvases, some stretched, some rolled, others leaning against the walls in towering stacks. Easels stood like silent sentinels, and the air was heavy with the odor of linseed oil and varnish. In the center of the room, seated before a final easel, was an old man. He was tall, even in age, thin, almost to emaciation, with a mane of white hair and a face of finely cut features now deeply lined. His eyes, bright and piercing beneath shaggy brows, turned toward us with a calm that held neither fear nor surprise. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said in a voice surprisingly firm and cultured, "and Dr. Watson, you have come more swiftly than I dared hope. Gentlemen of the police, I presume." He rose slowly, leaning upon a stick, and made a slight bow. Upon the easel before him rested a half-finished self-portrait, the face we saw now, rendered with merciless truth. "Elias Hawthorne," Holmes said quietly, "or the shadow artist, as you styled yourself." "The same," the old man replied. 50 years ago I was young and ambitious, granted the rare privilege of prolonged access to study the masters in the National Gallery. I copied them for my own instruction: Turner, Gainsborough, Constable, Reynolds. My copies grew so close that one night, in a moment of mad pride, I exchanged them. I told myself it was temporary, that I would study the originals in secret and restore them. But the world acclaimed the restored vigour of the pictures, my own subtle enhancements, and I was trapped in my own deception. He moved painfully to a chair and sat, gesturing for us to do the same. I lived quietly, selling minor works under other names, always preserving the true paintings in a hidden vault. Wealth I had in moderation, fame never. But in these last months, illness has brought me face to face with judgment. I could not bear that my crime should die with me unconfessed. Yet a simple surrender seemed too crude for what I had done. So I devised this pilgrimage: 4 churches, 4 paintings, 4 riddles, knowing that only you, Mr. Holmes, could follow it to the end and restore the masterpieces honourably. Holmes regarded him steadily. You have committed a grave theft, Mr. Hawthorne, whatever your subsequent care. The law must take its course. I know it, Hawthorne answered simply. I am ready. But grant me one thing, that the forgeries may hang beside the originals one day, labelled as mine. They are the best work I ever did. Lestrade stepped forward with the warrant, but his manner was gentler than I had ever seen it. Elias Hawthorne, I arrest you on charges of theft and fraud. The old man submitted without protest, even offering a faint smile as the handcuffs were fastened. As we descended the stairs, Holmes paused on the landing and looked back at the studio glowing faintly in the gaslight. A remarkable talent thrown away upon a single mad impulse, he said softly. Yet, in his way, he has preserved 4 great works better than the gallery itself might have done. A strange criminal, Watson, one who punished himself far more severely than any court will now do. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, soft and silent over the grimy roofs of Whitechapel, as we carried the shadow artist toward whatever justice awaited him. Thus ended the strange adventure of the shadow artist. The 4 recovered masterpieces were restored to the National Gallery within the week, where they now hang once more in their accustomed places, authenticated beyond doubt by every modern test. The forgeries, those brilliant impostors that had deceived 2 generations, were not destroyed. On the contrary, after much debate among the trustees, they were placed in a small adjacent room with full labels acknowledging the hand of Elias Hawthorne. They draw almost as many visitors as the originals, for the public loves a tale of mystery and genius combined. Hawthorne himself stood trial at the Old Bailey in the spring. He pleaded guilty, and the court heard in evidence the full story of his long concealment and final voluntary restitution. Medical testimony confirmed that he was in failing health, unlikely to survive long in confinement. The judge, taking all circumstances into account, imposed a light sentence of 6 months' imprisonment, which Hawthorne served quietly in the infirmary wing. He died peacefully less than a year later, leaving his modest estate to a charity for the support of young artists. I have often thought since upon the curious moral balance of the affair. 4 great paintings had been stolen, yet in Hawthorne's secret care they had been shielded from the indifferent handling and poor restoration practices that marred other works in the gallery during those decades. His forgeries, far from damaging the nation's heritage, had kept the public gaze fixed upon images of surpassing beauty, even if the hand was not always that which was supposed. Holmes himself, in one of his rarer reflective moods, acknowledged the ambiguity. A strange case, Watson, he remarked one evening as we sat before the fire in Baker Street. The man was undeniably a thief, yet he preserved what he stole better than its lawful guardians might have done. His crime enriched the world with 8 fine paintings instead of 4 genuine, 4 spurious, yet all admirable. I could not resist a smile. You almost sound as though you regret his conviction. Holmes knocked the ashes from his pipe and reached for his violin. Not regret, precisely. Justice must be seen to be done. But there are crimes that carry their own punishment. and Hawthorne's conscience was a harsher jailer than any prison warder. He sought absolution through the only channel he trusted, my poor abilities. And in granting it, we served both art and justice. He tightened a string and drew the bow softly across it, sending a low, melancholy strain through the room. Outside, the London night was clear and cold, the stars bright above the rooftops. I watched the firelight flicker upon the familiar clutter of our sitting room, the chemical table, the unanswered correspondence pinned to the mantel with a jackknife, the bullet pox in the wall opposite Holmes's chair, and felt that comfortable sense of homecoming that always followed the conclusion of a case. Many adventures were to come in the years that followed, some more dangerous, some more grotesque, but few left so poignant an impression as that Christmas pilgrimage through the ancient churches of England in pursuit of the shadow artist. It remains in my mind as a tale not merely of detection, but of the strange paths by which a troubled soul may at last find peace. Holmes played on for a while, the notes rising and falling like distant bells. At length he laid the violin aside and glanced at the clock. "Time for a little supper, I think. Mrs. Hudson has left us a cold goose from yesterday's Christmas dinner, and perhaps a glass of something to toast the season." I joined him willingly, and we ate in companionable silence. The adventure closed, the shadows dispersed, and the light of 4 great paintings shining once more upon the walls of the nation.